When the world is reduced to just two people, is humanity still something worth holding on to? The story takes place on Earth after a global war. All civilization has turned into ruins. In this silent, lifeless world, only two people are still moving, Cheeto and Yuri. They may not be the last humans alive, but as far as the horizon they can see, the only ones who can move are themselves. Every day, they only need to think about three things: water, food, and a place to hide from the wind at night. Yuri is a sharpshooter, but that kind of perfect, never miss accuracy has become a boring skill in this world. So they make up their own fun. They line up empty cans in the snow. Yuri shoots them one by one. The snow flying into the air is the last bit of entertainment they have left. After all, this world is never short on guns and bullets. What it lacks is a reason to keep living. That day, they were hungry and freezing. They searched through the snow all day and finally found a crate of military rations. Inside was a whole box of chocolate biscuits. In that moment, they were as excited as if they had found buried treasure. Cheeto wanted to ration the biscuits carefully, but Yuri grabbed them and swallowed everything in one go. She even closed her eyes, slowly savoring every bite. That really made Cheeto angry, and just like that, a war broke out between the two girls. After fooling around and fighting for a while, they were both exhausted, lying flat in the snow. Then they both started laughing. The laughter was a little bitter and a little warm, because they both knew this was a war no one could win. In this world, they only had each other left. After that, they continued on their journey, like a weekend trip with no destination. Black-haired Cheeto was calm and rational, always thinking about supplies, fuel, and routes. Blonde Yuri, on the other hand, is always cheerful and carefree. The sky was growing dark, the wind was getting stronger, but they still hadn't found a place to shelter from the cold. Yet Yuri was busy building a snowman on top of Cheeto's helmet. Cheeto sighed helplessly and asked her if she could act a little more mature. Yuri just laughed and said that mature people were already dead. The snow fell heavier and heavier, just as Yuri began shivering from the cold. Cheeto suddenly noticed something. Ahead of them stood a tall building. They dragged their exhausted bodies inside and discovered it was an abandoned power plant. The place was filled with pipes, and there was still residual heat drifting above them. Yuri immediately pulled out her gun and fired at a cracked hot water pipe. The next second, hot water burst out violently. Scalding steam enveloped them. Both of them laughed at the same time. They took off their coats and moved closer to the pipe to warm themselves. Yuri said if they could take a hot bath, it would be perfect. The moment Cheeto heard that, she had an idea. She quickly reworked the abandoned pipes into a makeshift bathtub. The two of them sank into the hot water. Their bodies felt like they were melting. They couldn't even remember the last time they had taken a bath. Maybe it was before the war. Maybe it was when the world hadn't fallen apart yet. Yuri looked up at the ceiling. Steam filled the air. For a brief moment, this apocalyptic world seemed to regain its warmth, and they finally had a short moment of peace. After the bath, the two sat by the fire to keep warm, but Yuri accidentally threw Cheeto's treasured book into the flames. Cheeto immediately snatched it back, but half of the book had already been burned. Angry, Cheeto smacked Yuri with the book. That book was truly precious to her. Yuri knew she had messed up. She apologized awkwardly. That night, Cheeto fell asleep instantly. She didn't even bother scolding Yuri. Yuri, however, stayed awake all night. She stared at Cheeto's back, filled with regret. Then she took another book out of Cheeto's bag, standing in front of the fire. It looked as if she was about to burn it again. The next morning, when Cheeto woke up, the door had been sealed shut by snow. The two of them worked together to push it open. Yuri strained to push the motorcycle and asked Cheeto if she was still angry. Cheeto said that although the book was damaged, at least the diary was still there. But when she opened the diary, she froze. There was a new drawing inside. It was Cheeto sleeping. Below the drawing were the words "I'm sorry." In that moment, Cheeto's heart softened. She then lectured Yuri, telling her not to waste paper again. The words sounded like a scolding, but her tone was much gentler than before. They continued moving forward. The snow began to melt. The sunlight grew unusually bright. Cheeto took off her shoes. She stepped into the water to wash clothes. Yuri sat beside her. Suddenly, Yuri dashed forward. Cheeto was dragged into the water by the rope attached to her. Just as Cheeto was about to scold Yuri, Yuri held up a dead fish in front of her. Even though it was just a dead fish, It somehow filled them with excitement, because it had been so long since they had seen any living creature at all. Cheeto didn't think too much about it. She followed the method she had read in a book. She skewered the fish with a steel rod. She lit a fire and grilled it. Yuri couldn't wait and took a bite. She chewed slowly, savoring it with great enjoyment. Cheeto couldn't resist and took a bite as well, but she sensed a strange taste. Even so, they finished the fish. It was a long overdue proper meal for them. After that, the two lay down side by side. They stared at the grayish-white sky. They talked about where the fish might have come from. Yuri said she wanted to go somewhere with lots of fish. Cheeto smiled and said nothing. She knew that such a place probably didn't exist. After a short rest, they set off again. Cheeto suddenly asked Yuri, "Why do people live?" Yuri didn't understand what she meant. Cheeto sighed and didn't continue. At that moment, they were driving through an empty city. They were like the last two people left in the world. One liked to mutter endlessly, the other was always a little absent-minded. They searched for food. While heading toward the unknown, Yuri's breathing suddenly became steady. She had fallen asleep again. Cheeto stopped the vehicle. She raised her binoculars. She looked toward a lonely tower in the distance. That was their next destination, but when she lowered the binoculars, she was shocked to discover a cigarette butt on the ground that hadn't gone out yet. Yuri asked Cheeto in confusion, "Can a cigarette light itself?" The answer was obviously no, which meant there were still other people in these ruins. They exchanged a glance. Instantly, they became alert. At that moment, Cheeto suddenly noticed dense footprints ahead of them. That meant there were many humans still in this area, but that only made them even more cautious, because they didn't know whether those people were a new kind of danger. Suddenly, the buildings around them exploded. Then, a man walked out. His name was Kanazawa. He was holding a detonator in his hand. He said he was blowing up a bridge, because only by doing that could he keep moving forward. In this apocalyptic world, everyone had their own way of surviving. Cheeto treated travel as her faith. Yuri relied on firearms to feel safe, and Kanazawa used explosions to prove that he was still alive. Gradually, they became friends. They climbed bridges, pushed vehicles, and repaired roads together. This brief cooperation allowed them to glimpse the last bit of human warmth in the apocalypse. Kanazawa took them to a gas station. There were still machines that could run, and the air still smelled of fuel. Kanazawa took out a stack of crumpled maps. He said they were the world he had walked through, or rather, proof that he was still alive. Cheeto and Yuri didn't say anything. It was a quiet understanding shared between travelers. They were all on the road. They were just heading in different directions. The elevator slowly rose. Cheeto knelt on the floor in fear. Yuri held her hand. She smiled and said it was okay. They could still see the scenery. This was the last courage of humanity, finding a bit of beauty within fear. But just then, the elevator suddenly stopped. The maps fell downward. Kanazawa lunged without hesitation, but the papers had already been swept away by the wind. As if his last sense of meaning in existence had been taken with them, Kanazawa told them to let go. After all, this world had already lost its direction, but Cheeto and Yuri struggled and managed to pull him back. At that moment, the city lights came on. It wasn't an illusion, and it wasn't the rebirth of humanity. It was just that some automatic system hadn't completely broken down yet, but that light still made them feel a faint sense of hope. The three of them sat down side by side. No one spoke. Yuri took out some food and handed it to Kanazawa. Kanazawa accepted it. He chewed slowly. The taste held salt and ash, and also a long-lost warmth. He handed his camera to Cheeto. He said it was his eyes. He wanted her to help him see farther. He no longer chased after the scattered maps, because beneath those lights, he finally understood. The meaning of living is not to record the world, but to be able to share this brief moment of quiet with others. The lights illuminated them. They also illuminated the loneliness of the apocalypse. Maybe this world would never recover, but in that moment, they were truly alive. In this apocalyptic world, the living seem more like ghosts than the dead. They can only rely on memories and faith to barely maintain the shape of being human. This is the Earth of the year 3230. Perhaps humanity has been gone for far too long, so long that even taking photographs has become an ancient and unfamiliar ritual. It was Yuri's first time standing in front of a camera. She didn't even know how to pose. She looked especially awkward and stiff. Cheeto and Yuri continued their journey. They drifted through snow and ruins. They didn't know where the end was, nor did they know why they kept going. Maybe it was simply because they were still alive, so they had to keep moving forward. The road ahead was still long. Yuri held the camera and snapped pictures at random along the way. She photographed many stone statues. Then she said to Cheeto, "Those statues look just like you." But just as Cheeto was distracted, the motorcycle hit a pillar. They fell into the snow one after the other. Cheeto angrily knocked Yuri on the head and snatched the camera away from her. Night fell. The two of them lit a fire on a rundown rooftop to keep warm. On the camera screen, the number in the bottom right corner was slowly decreasing. It showed how many photos were left. There were still 520,000 shots remaining. Cheeto lifted her head. She gazed at the glowing buildings in the distance. Then she said to Yuri, "The food will only last 30 days. Then let's take photos for 30 days. Yuri said, "Once the food is gone, it's gone, but photos can stay." At that moment, Cheeto suddenly fell silent. She walked over to the motorcycle. She placed the camera on it, aiming it toward where they were standing. Cheeto told Yuri, "If one day we disappear, maybe someone will see this photo." The shutter clicked. That moment seemed to freeze into eternity. The next day, they finally reached the glowing building. Up close, the light had long since gone out. All that remained was a pitch-black hall, like an enormous black hole. Cheeto turned on the spotlight. The beam cut through the darkness. Along the walls stood rows of stone statues. Each one stared straight ahead, as if waiting for something. They kept walking. Their footsteps echoed through the corridor, as if the building itself were breathing. Cheeto looked at the map patterns on the wall. She felt this place was probably a temple, but just then, the light suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Yuri kept calling out Cheeto's name, but there was no response. Yuri's voice echoed through the hollow space. In fear, she chambered a round in her gun. At that moment, she finally understood. Without Cheeto, she had no idea what to do. Finally, a blinding light appeared in the distance. Both of them looked up at the same time. It was 3 enormous statues of gods. Their bodies were glowing. The floor was glowing. Even the lotus flowers in the pond were glowing. Cheeto walked over. She gently stepped onto the surface of the water. It was fake. Everything here was metal. Yuri lowered her head in disappointment. She felt that even the gods were fake. Cheeto thought that maybe this was humanity's final faith, a way to deceive themselves into believing there was still hope. Yuri suddenly smiled. She said, "I liked it better when it was dark just now. Back then, finding you felt more reassuring than finding a god." Cheeto froze for a moment. Then she said, "In that case, you should offer me some food." Their laughter echoed through the empty temple. Under the gaze of the statues, it sounded unusually gentle. They got back on the motorcycle and rode into the endless wind and snow. The world remained silent. The statues remained cold. But inside that camera, there was one more photo. A photo of 2 people smiling side by side. Cheeto and Yuri's journey of exploration was not for survival. It was to prove that, when the light goes out and faith collapses, they will still choose to record and move forward. Because as long as someone is still pressing the shutter, this world has not truly come to an end.